everybody, it's Pete. It's a few days after Christmas. It's cold, it's wet, it's rainy outside, so I thought I would draw a picture using Camera Lucida and show you how I do that. Today, since I want to be able to record it not only with this camera, but also within the user interface, first thing I'm going to do is bring up Control Center, and I'm going to push this record button right there. And it says microphone is on. That's great. So I'm going to hit start recording and just tap off the screen to get rid of that. And now I'm recording. Everything that I do on my iPad is going to be recorded. Then I'm going to run the application and put the device in here. So let's start Camera Lucida and let's pick an image to draw. So I think I will pick this image of, there we go, Bill Bixby. And I'm going to be placing it in the stand here. Before I do that, I really want to make sure that the camera is facing over this. So I'm going to be rotating the iPad so that the camera's closer to me. Now you notice when you do any kind of rotating, the user interface rotates for you. I'm going to knead it so the buttons are down at the bottom. So the last time I rotated it before I placed it flat, I want to make sure I tilted it toward my face. Okay, so I'm going to place it in here and I'm going to lock it into this stand. This is the stand you can get on Amazon. It's a tablet bed stand. It works quite well. You can hold things in there nice and sturdy. Now that I've got the image picked, its camera's looking down at my paper. Just touching on the screen is going to make that image go translucent. You can see that my piece of paper is a little bit small, so I'm just going to zoom this image down a little bit smaller, like that. That looks good. And now I'm ready to go into draw mode. If I had planned on coming back to this drawing later on and leaving everything as it is, I'd want to hit this save button. Because that save button is what makes sure that you have the exact zoom, rotation, and cropping for that image so that you can restore it later on and you don't have to worry about a really difficult time of trying to exactly match up the image. All right, so now I'm going to hit the draw button right there. And since I said I was going to do a time lapse, I think what I'll do is I'll set the time lapse playback scale way up to something like 65 and just start hitting the record button. I've got it set right now so it's not recording the user interface. So it's going to look just like whatever the camera is seeing. You won't see any buttons, you won't see any zooming in around or anything. And I'm going to be using this ebony pencil today. So I'm ready to get started drawing. I always like to look at the transparency. I notice there's a lot of shadows. I have a couple of lights here and lights overhead, and I don't like these shadows. So I'm going to turn on the iPad Pro's flashlight, which adds a lot of light underneath my drawing surface. That's really great that it does that with the iPad Pro. I like that a lot. Now, when I start drawing this, I've already decided he's a very masculine man. I'm not going to go with super smooth kinds of textures. I don't mind some really rough lines. So I'm going to come into the drawing and I'm going to posterize it, and I'm going to posterize it quite heavily. The reason I'm going to posterize it heavily, like 6 shades, super heavy would be 2 shades of gray. But I'm going to go to like 6 because what I really want to do is I want to identify the darkest darks and start by making them as black as possible. Now you could do that later on. I sometimes do that first because it gives me a frame of reference for how dark everything else needs to be. And since every drawing utensil is different, I'd like to know just how black can this be. In this drawing, this spot of hair right here is very, very black. Now it's got texture to it, obviously, that we can worry about later on. But this whole area is extremely black. So I'm going to go back to these 6 shades of gray, and I'm just going to black that in really hard. And I'm going to use pencil strokes that are following the contours of his head. Like I said, I'm not worried about delicate lines in this drawing, but I do want this to be about as black as you can make it. Okay, now if you look here, there's also some extremely dark spots around his eyes and around his eyebrows. I'm going to sharpen my pencil a little bit. Just going to cover this up. And then I'm going to come into his eyes, and I'm going to get those really dark spots. That didn't get very sharp. Also about this time, I like to switch to my reading glasses because I realize my eyes aren't what they used to be. Okay. So I'm going to come in here. I don't want to draw on the paper. I mean, on this shield paper, I want to draw on the actual drawing, so make sure that paper is not in the way. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to blacken in these really dark spots. These are the spots that are going to disappear. Now, in the drawing, these black areas, these shade, they represent depth. They represent areas in the drawing that are either in areas of shadow or naturally dark. But the ones that are really interesting are the ones that are areas of shadow. And if you think about this eye socket right here, there's this shape that comes, and then there's a curved eye in it. But right now, all I'm doing is blocking in the dark. Later on, I'm going to be able to blend. I'll be able to blend areas. Little thin detailed lines are sometimes the difference between a drawing that looks very realistic and one that doesn't. Now, I also like to use the flicker function quite a bit. The recent update makes it so that as soon as you move the slider and let up, it's going to start the flicker. I find that a flicker speed of about 2 seconds works nice. And you know it's working well when the drawing underneath starts to disappear a little bit, because your drawing on the paper will match the reference photo. Okay, so I've done the really dark spots. Now I want to come in and I want to do my next shades of gray, my next darkest areas. Normally I would just do that freehand, but since I'm showing you some tools here, I'm going to come in, I'm going to show you level eyes. We've currently selected 6 shades of gray. I'm going to go into level eyes and I'm going to say, show me just the darkest. And look, you can see here, I missed some of the darkest areas, like the whole nose area and the mouth. So I'm glad I did that because these other areas really need to be dark as well. All right, using level 2, these are the next shades of gray. And to get that shade of gray, I'm going to be using the same pencil, but I'm going to be just pushing down a little bit less hard so it doesn't leave quite as much as a mark. This area right here is not white. It's just that I didn't bring it all the way in. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to fill these in. Whole bunch of hair over here. Does hair scare you when you draw? It should. It's really difficult. There are people on the internet who are just complete experts at it, and I'm not exactly sure how they do it. So, zooming back out, look at this. And I go, okay, I think I got most of the spots. Yeah, there's some up around the edges and things like that. But now I'm going to do some blending. And I'm going to blend between these areas. And I'm going to remember the shapes of his head, which is this. See, his forehead curves like this. So I want to make sure that when possible, I follow that curve. So coming in here, this is very dark. It needs to stay dark. His whole eye is in shadow. But what's really important is that this curve, this bulge is picking up light. And I need to have that come through when I'm done. So afterwards, I'll be sure to lighten that area and to make sure that I pick up some of that reflected light. Now, I love doing the nose. It's really amazing, the shape of the nose, and I sometimes think you can learn how to draw just by doing noses, because the curves are just really awesome. Oops. And what I love about this is that there's the hint of negative space that gets used here that shows you the edge of the nose. All right. I always like to go and see what the recording looks like, so let's go see what the recording looks like. That's it right there.